A guten Erev Shabbos. Now that we are well into the month of Elul, it's time to think about Teshuvah and what that means for us. There's really two phases to Teshuvah. One is to have regret over what's happened in the past, and the second part is a commitment to change the future. The fact of the matter is, the two are very much connected. First of all, let's be clear what we are talking about. When someone did something that maybe they shouldn't have done, or they let a chance go by when they could have done something good, that for sure is an opportunity for teshuvah. Listening to one of Rabbi Beshefkin's podcasts, one of our road trips over the summer, we heard about another angle on this. What about a tzaddik doing tshuva, a righteous person? Wait, isn't that tzaddik someone who conducts themselves properly all the time, never transgresses? Maybe. But according to this way of thinking, there's also an opportunity for a tzaddik to do teshuva, to review and fix what happened in the past and resolve to do better in the future for mitzvot. And that opens a whole new world of possibility. Because in a way, it's not that hard to do tshuva on sins. Let's say a person forgot Shema one evening, went to sleep after a long day, just sacked out, slept like a log. Now it's morning, and the time for saying the nighttime Shema is gone, so what to do? Now, the person feels badly. They missed such a great opportunity to connect with God, so of course, they'll feel some remorse. And of course, they'll resolve to do better the next night and the next and the next. They'll change the future. But what about the person who did remember to say the Shema before they went to bed? How can they do tshuva? They did the right thing already. They did the mitzvah, they checked the boxes. No small mitzvah either. To proclaim the oneness of God is a pretty significant thing to do. Why should that person do teshuvah? What was missing? With this, we come back to our theme that usually the Torah tells us what to do. Say Shema, put up a mezuzah, eat matzah, tell the story of the Exodus. Once in a while, it also tells us how to feel. The Mishnah says we should feel ourselves coming out of Egypt on the night of the Seder. Rambam says act as if it's happening. Maybe dress up like Moses with the bed sheet and the whole thing, the staff, if you like. So maybe there's this element of feeling to all the mitzvot. Yes, maybe I said Shema at nighttime, but did I feel it? Did I mean it? Did I let it become part of me, part of my outlook on the world? Did I let it change me? There are plenty of opportunities for the future to resolve to do even better in the future. What I did was good, and isn't better even better? Teshuvah in this sense means more alignment, more focus, more intent, more better. Now, in this week's parsha of Shoftim, there's a discussion of cities of refuge. Interesting area in Jewish law. When a person does something terrible, brings about the death of another person unintentionally, let's say their axe slipped off its handle and hit someone, God forbid, they're not liable for punishment. It was an accident. And at the same time, the family of this accidental victim might seek vengeance from this death, no matter how unintentional it was. They shouldn't, but people do all kinds of things they shouldn't. So the Torah provides a city of refuge, a place where a person can flee, and as long as they're there, they're safe from retribution. It's really all part of setting up a just and civil society, which is a big focus of our reading in the portion of Shoftim. Shoftim v'shotrim titein lecha b'chol sha'arecha, the portion opens, set for yourself judges and officers of the law in all your gates, all your precincts. Among the other dozens of mitzvahs in Parsha Shoftim are included to listen to the Jewish Supreme Court, the Sanhedrin, at all times, to appoint a Jewish king who will rule fairly and justly, with an additional 3 separate mitzvahs that prohibit the head of state from using his office for personal gain or to amass wealth. So, yet another mitzvah for the sovereign to write a Sefer Torah and carry that Torah with him all the time, so he'll follow its rules all the time. Yet another, the mitzvah of Bal Tashchis. We cannot cause wanton destruction, even in wartime, for example, by cutting down fruit-bearing trees. And plenty of mitzvahs about avoiding idolatrous worship so that the whole society keeps its balance and doesn't lose focus. Among all these, it's the idea of cities of refuge that liken themselves to the month of Elul, the month that we're in now, leading up to Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. It's a place of refuge, it's a place of safety, of protected reflection on what's come before and how to transform it into better things in the future, very much fitting with the spirit of these days. All those other mitzvahs of judges and officers and bailiffs and batei din, Torah courts, they apply at all times and all places. Today, in the fair city of Toronto, there is a beit din, a rabbinic court for monetary disputes, and another one for divorces. May we be spared of all those. And yet another beit din for conversions. I believe Montreal has even more than one of each. So wherever we've lived, in Babylon or Europe or Africa, the southern part or the northern part, Jewish communities have set up judicial systems to handle disputes. They tell stories from the olden days in Poland of farmers and landowners, Polish people, who would take their disputes to the rabbinic court because they thought they would get a more fair hearing and a wiser verdict than the courts that existed in their society at the time. So all that is part of our history, and yet cities of refuge are only established in Israel, not anywhere else. Strange. You would think those would be needed just like any other part of the court system, but the same Torah that tells us there should be such a thing says only in Israel. We can find a little insight into that if we think of Israel compared to the rest of the world, all the places the Jewish people have lived. Israel is not just a nice place with good weather and good oranges, not just a place where they speak Hebrew, because that's a pretty new thing. The very land of Israel itself is on a higher spiritual plane than the rest of the world. That's why we talk about making aliyah, going up, ascending. Israel is not a particularly mountainous country. There are a few mountains and peaks in the north, but the highest point of elevation in Canada is nearly 3 times higher than Israel's loftiest peak. It's not about the measurements. It's about the atmosphere, the elevation of the soul. Israel is a holy place. There's so much sensitivity to sanctity there that's reflected in the way Jews live our lives when we are there, even if we're just visiting for a short time. In Chutz La'aretz, outside of Israel, even with lofty mountains, the spirituality is not the same as it is in Israel. And that helps us understand what's so special about this month of Elul. Elul, the time leading up to the high holidays, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot for that matter, it's like a refuge for us. It's a little breath of Israel for us. It's a warm hug that embraces us in holiness. From that perspective, we can readily see what we need to work on in the coming year, even in the few weeks left of this year, to be able to get ourselves in a good space to that next year. That's much harder to see when we're in an environment that looks the other way or closes its eyes to insensitivity and coarseness, like the many countries we've lived in over the centuries. We need a touch of Israel to get us connected and give us the right focus, the right perspective. When we're in that space, that place of refuge, that sacred space, Elul, just like the city of refuge in Israel, we can look at ourselves with a little more objectivity and see what needs fixing, what needs uplifting, and what needs healing. And this includes mitzvahs, which I did, and in the future I can do even better and bring more of my whole self into it. Again, judgment does take place and has to take place wherever people live. Pirkei Avos famously says, don't judge a person until you come to his place, by which we usually mean don't judge someone until you've walked a mile in their shoes. But it also means literally in their place. How can judges in New York judge someone in Toronto? Or how can a judge in Israel judge a case in Australia? The judges have to be in that place and recognize what the situation is in that place to be able to judge a case fairly. So we have to step into that Ir Miklat, that city of refuge, that little bit of Israel, tap into that within ourselves to be able to have the right perspective. We have a unique opportunity this year with the holidays coming so quote unquote late, which is true and not true. Yes, Rosh Hashanah is always on the 1st of Tishrei this year, just like any other year. But since this year was a leap year in the Jewish calendar, Elul occurs not in the middle of August, when everybody usually goes on vacation and relaxes a little bit, the opposite of what Elul should feel like. This year, we are blessed to have Elul begin a little bit later in the fall, when everyone's in the mood to get serious, get to work, students are hitting the books, and so should we. The power of Elul comes from its origins. Rosh Chodesh Elul is the day when Moses ascended Mount Sinai for the second time. The first time was Shavuos, to receive the first tablets. When he brought them down from the mountain to the Jewish people, he found us in the midst of the worst mistake we've ever made: idolatry, worshiping a golden calf. The tablets were broken, so our great leader and teacher went up to ask God's forgiveness, and over a 40-day period, he managed to secure it. The 40th day after Rosh Chodesh Elul is Yom Kippur, the 10th of the month of Tishrei, which is really our festival of forgiveness. The ability to redeem the past, even a past as blemished by errors in judgment, like the golden calf, is the promise of this time of year. We can redeem the past by letting it go and letting it be a springboard to better times ahead. It's worth our while to see ourselves in the safe and protecting space, the Eretz Yisrael embrace of Elul, to give ourselves a good perspective on where we are and where we would like to be and how we would like to be. Someone once asked the great Rabbi Shlomo of Karlin, what's the greatest sin a person can commit? Rabbi Shlomo put his head in his hands for a few minutes, and after some careful thought, he exclaimed, the greatest avera is to forget that he's a ben melech. The greatest sin, the greatest transgression a person can commit is to forget that we are the children of the king. Everything else follows from that. In the weeks and days and hours to come, may we remember who we are, where we are, and what we can be. Surely everything else will follow from that. A good Shabbos, a happy and a healthy and a sweet New Year.